June 13, 1940. The skies over Saint-Valery-en-Caux, France. Smoke clung to the cliffs like a shroud. The remnants of the British 51st Highland Division were cornered, exhausted, out of ammunition, their backs to the sea. The channel that once promised safety now glimmered like a cruel mirage. Through binoculars, a German officer watched the scene in silence. He was tall, composed, and oddly still, unlike the chaos that surrounded him. His name was Major General Erwin Rommel. As the last shells landed and the white flags rose, the battlefield fell eerily quiet. Rommel stepped forward, his boots crunching over the rubble-strewn earth. The captured British commander, Major General Victor Fortune, stood waiting, defiant even in defeat. Then, something unexpected happened. Rommel raised his hand and saluted. It wasn't mockery. It wasn't arrogance. It was respect, from one soldier to another. And in that moment, amid war's brutality, two enemies recognized something deeply human in each other: courage, duty, honor. This gesture, almost lost to history, would echo through the war, because the man who saluted his captor would later become the Desert Fox, the most respected German commander of World War II, admired even by those who fought against him. But how did this moment happen? And why did one of Hitler's top generals show such honor to his enemy? France, early summer 1940. The world was collapsing in weeks. The German Blitzkrieg, lightning war, had shattered Europe's defenses. France, once confident behind the Maginot Line, now burned from Calais to the Seine. Towns fell faster than news could travel. Columns of refugees moved like rivers across the countryside, carts creaking, children crying, smoke in the distance. Within this chaos, the British 51st Highland Division stood their ground in northern France. Unlike the troops evacuated at Dunkirk, they had been ordered to stay and fight alongside their French allies. Proud Scotsmen in kilts and khaki, they were led by Major General Victor Fortune, a quiet man with a sense of duty carved in stone. His men dug in near the coastal town of Saint-Valery-en-Caux, vowing not to abandon the French. Across the battlefield, a rising German star prepared his next strike: Erwin Rommel, commander of the 7th Panzer Division. Rommel had already proven himself in the invasion of France, a daring tactician who moved faster than radio reports, who believed in momentum, shock, and precision. His troops called him Papa Rommel. His enemies called him the Ghost. He respected courage, even in those he fought. As dawn broke on June 10, 1940, Rommel's tanks and motorized infantry closed in. British artillery thundered, French guns barked back, and for 2 days the Highlanders fought in brutal street-to-street combat. Shells reduced stone cottages to dust. Smoke swallowed the harbor. By night, the sea glowed orange with fire. Rommel watched his men fight with mechanical efficiency, yet his admiration grew for the stubborn British defense. They refused to yield even when surrounded. It wasn't hate he saw in their eyes. It was duty. By June 12th, all hope of evacuation was gone. The weather had turned the channel into a steel-gray wall. Allied ships couldn't reach them. Ammunition dwindled. Medical tents overflowed. General Fortune knew the fight was over. That night, he gathered his officers and gave a final order: "We have done all that soldiers can do." At dawn, the Highlanders raised white flags on their ruined positions. Rommel entered the town cautiously. He had expected bitterness or chaos, but instead he saw British soldiers standing in perfect formation, rifles stacked neatly, waiting to surrender with dignity. It was not defeat he witnessed, but discipline. Rommel stopped, removed his cap, and looked directly at General Fortune. Then, in a gesture that shocked even his own staff, he raised his right hand and saluted the man who had opposed him. No words were exchanged. None were needed. For that brief moment, war's cruelty paused, replaced by a soldier's respect. The salute was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning of what Rommel's war would become. After Saint-Valery-en-Caux, Rommel's reputation spread through Germany like wildfire. Hitler himself took notice, the Iron Fox who conquered France faster than the generals in Berlin had predicted. But Rommel was not like the others. He was no aristocrat, no political climber. He was a soldier first, shaped by the trenches of the First World War, where he learned that courage mattered more than ideology. Soon after France's collapse, Rommel was given a new command, the Africa Corps, sent to support Italy's faltering army in North Africa. When his boots touched the sand of Libya in early 1941, he faced an entirely different battlefield. Endless dunes, heat like a furnace, and enemies who underestimated him. From the beginning, Rommel fought differently. He struck at dawn. He vanished by dusk. He moved faster than intelligence could track him. British officers began to speak of him with both frustration and admiration. "Rommel again," they would mutter, staring at maps with red pins pushed further west each morning. Radio operators caught fragments of his voice. Calm, firm, almost surgical in command. Move, surround, strike. Every attack was a lesson in precision. But while his victories dazzled Berlin, Rommel's code of honor remained strangely intact. He treated prisoners humanely. He forbade executions. When an Allied ambulance convoy appeared on the horizon, his tanks stopped firing until it passed. He told his men, "Even in war, there must be decency." Across the desert, the British Eighth Army began to understand their enemy. They feared his tactics but respected his character. Some even referred to him as the gentleman general. Back in London, British newspapers echoed that sentiment. Rommel, the Desert Fox. For the first time in modern warfare, a man fighting for Hitler's army was admired by those he fought against. By mid-1942, Rommel's Africa Corps had driven deep into Egypt, nearing the vital supply line to the Suez Canal. Britain was desperate. In his path stood General Bernard Montgomery, a commander as cautious as Rommel was daring. What followed was a duel of minds. El Alamein. The first battle came in July 1942. Rommel's forces were stretched thin, his supply lines crippled by the Royal Navy's control of the Mediterranean. Fuel was scarce, tanks were worn, and men were exhausted. Yet Rommel pressed on, attacking with what strength remained. Night after night, the desert lit up like a storm. Tracer fire cutting through the blackness, artillery echoing off dunes, the air vibrating with engines and fear. Rommel was everywhere, inspecting front lines, shouting orders, pulling wounded men to cover with his own hands. His soldiers believed he couldn't be killed. They were wrong, but not yet. Then came the Second Battle of El Alamein, October 1942. Montgomery had regrouped. Britain had brought overwhelming reinforcements. New tanks, fresh troops, superior logistics. The tide was turning. Rommel returned from illness to find his army outnumbered 4-1. His lines crumbled under relentless shelling. He requested permission to retreat. Hitler refused. "Victory or death," the Führer ordered. Rommel's reply was cold and clear. "My Führer, I cannot ask my men to die in vain." Defying orders, he began a strategic withdrawal, saving tens of thousands of lives, but sealing his own fate with Hitler. Rommel had lost Africa, but not his honor. Captured British officers later said they were relieved it was Rommel they faced, not someone else. One recalled, "He fought us hard, but he fought fair." The same man who once saluted his enemy in France had carried that respect across continents. Even in defeat, he remained bound by the code of a soldier, not a Nazi. But deep within Germany, that code was now dangerous. The war was turning, and Hitler no longer trusted men with consciences. The once celebrated Desert Fox now lived under the shadow of suspicion. Rommel, recovering from wounds sustained in Normandy, had been recalled to Europe to defend Hitler's Atlantic Wall, a wall that was already crumbling. He had seen what Hitler refused to see. The war was lost. By then the Allies had landed in France. American, British, and Canadian forces surged inland. Breaking through the defenses Rommel had warned were too thin, too rigid, too late. He begged Berlin for flexibility, for reserves, for realism. Instead, Hitler demanded fanaticism. Rommel's frustration turned to quiet rebellion. He refused to carry out scorched earth orders that would destroy French towns. He argued for surrender, not from weakness, but from a desire to save Germany from annihilation. It was a dangerous position, one whispered about in the corridors of power and the Gestapo alike. Then came July 20th, 1944, the day Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg planted a bomb inside Hitler's headquarters. The assassination failed. The Führer survived, and the hunt for conspirators began. Rommel had not been part of the bombing, but his name appeared in the margins of reports, a general too popular, too principled, too admired by the enemy. The salute at Saint-Valery, the humane conduct in Africa, the refusal to obey senseless orders, all now counted against him. October 14, 1944. 2 officers from Berlin arrived at Rommel's doorstep. They were polite, formal, chillingly calm. Inside his home, his wife Lucy and son Manfred waited as Rommel was given a choice: face a public trial for treason and endanger his family, or take poison. In exchange for their safety and an official hero's funeral, Rommel did not hesitate. He looked at his son and said quietly, "In a quarter of an hour, I'll be dead." He put on his gray field uniform, the same one he had worn through the deserts of Africa, and walked out to the car. Witnesses say he stood tall, without fear. The car drove a short distance from his home, parked under tall pines, and within minutes, it was over. Berlin announced that Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had died of war wounds. The truth was buried, but not forgotten. Years later, British veterans of the 8th Army sent wreaths to his grave. Some even attended memorials in his honor. They had fought him, but they had never hated him, because they understood what that salute in 1940 had meant, even before the world did. Rommel's story was no longer just about battles. It was about integrity in the face of madness, about a soldier who tried, in his own way, to remain human in an inhuman war. As one British officer wrote, "He fought like a lion, but with the heart of a man." The war ended in 1945. Germany lay in ruins, but Rommel's name refused to die. When Allied investigators combed through the wreckage of the Third Reich, they found few German commanders remembered with respect. Most were tainted by war crimes, blind obedience, or cruelty. Rommel stood apart. British and American generals, men who had fought directly against him, spoke his name with genuine admiration. Field Marshal Montgomery, his greatest rival in North Africa, later said, "We could never have defeated him without overwhelming force. He was a great general, and a noble one." In post-war Germany, Rommel became a symbol of what might have been: a soldier loyal to his country, but not to tyranny. His humanity during a time of brutality made him one of the few figures both sides could respect. He was no saint, but in a war that devoured conscience, he tried to keep his. The salute at Saint-Valery-en-Caux became more than a moment. It became a mirror. It reminded the world that even in the darkest hours, honor could survive. That respect between enemies was possible. That decency was not weakness. Rommel's story teaches us something about the paradox of war: how courage can exist on both sides, how a man can serve a doomed cause yet still act with dignity, and how one small gesture, a raised hand, a silent salute, can echo louder than an army's roar. Today, visitors still come to his grave in Herrlingen. They find a simple stone marked only with his name. No medals, no slogans, just silence and pine trees whispering in the wind. Some are veterans, some are historians, some are simply drawn to the mystery of a man who chose principle over survival. Rommel's salute was not just a sign of respect, it was a message across time: that humanity can exist even between enemies, that the line between hero and villain is sometimes drawn not by victory, but by conscience. In the end, the salute that began on a French battlefield became his legacy, a reminder that even in war, there can be moments of peace, moments when the world pauses and one soldier looks at another, not as enemy, but as equal.